I know I said I was trying to stay away from guides as they didn't really interest me. They weren't videos that I'm interested in making, but I thought this one would be fun and I think it'll be hopefully useful to a lot of people. So if there's anyone out there that's struggling with team composition, this video is for you. So before we get started, I do just want to define our terms. So we're going to start off with a denier. A denier is a monster that denies an enemy from attacking, from getting a turn in. So they can apply control status effects, stun, freeze, possession, time stop, all that stuff. And that does include cooldown activation and stamina removal, although stamina removal is like a really inconsistent form of denial. An attacker is super self-explanatory. They're really just there to deal damage. They can apply status effects, especially like tortures and damage boosts too, but the main thing is they're just there to deal damage. A tank is a monster that is there to absorb damage, so really just taunt and mega taunt. If the tank doesn't have access to either of those, they're really not an effective tank aside from maybe Gardenion, and they're not really worth using. A supporter is a monster that's there to support your allies, so that can come in a few different forms, but the main thing is either removing negative status effects, applying positive status effects like mainly damage boosts and like evasion, that kind of thing, or a mix of both. And lastly, this is a typically much less relevant type of monster. This is mainly like a war monster kind of thing. But cursors are really there to just debuff, torture your enemy. They're there to spam negative status effects, anything that's not a control status effect, because that would just be a denier. So example here, Sabidu, he really focuses on tortures, so he would be a cursor. Or you could take Geneza, for example. She is also a cursor. She spams debuffs. So at the end of the day, it's just like negative status effect spam that's not control focused. So what are some common types of team comps? So firstly, it'll be denier, supporter, and attacker. So the main thing is you want your denier 3 speed. You want them to go first. You want them to deny the enemy. You have your supporter there in case anything goes wrong. Say you have a bunch of tortures applied to your monsters, you want to remove those, or you want to damage boost your attacker, you want to remove any other kind of negative status effect. So your supporter is there to make sure everything is all good. Maybe your supporter can resurrect your allies in case they die. There's tons of different things that your supporter can do to help the team. And your attacker is there obviously to deal the damage. So if your supporter is the type of supporter to boost damage, maybe you want them to go just before your attacker. So ruin them in a way so they have just a tiny bit more speed than your attacker. They can apply damage boosts before your attacker gets a turn. Once your attacker gets their first turn, they'll do double damage, triple damage, whatever that damage boost may be. So this is a really solid, consistent lineup, and of course these monsters are 100% just examples. I wouldn't even really use this team. It's just not really necessary most of the time. It's kind of overkill to have both Honen and Akira. So just really think of this as denier, attacker, supporter, rather than Florian, Akira, and Honen. Next up, we've replaced the denier with a tank. So we've got tank, attacker, and supporter. This can be a really effective lineup, specifically with Adelaide or Linneas at rank 5 as the tank. If you don't have Adelaide or Linneas at rank 5 and you do want to run a lineup with this exact composition, then I would recommend replacing Adelaide with a taunt tank. You will likely have a taunt tank somewhere, a dodge area supporter, and a dodge area attacker. So you could do Max, you could do Dumbane, and then some sort of dodge area support, maybe Uriel, something like that, if you did want to do tank, supporter, and attacker. So the main thing here is just to make sure your supporter and your attacker are protected, whether that be with Linneas or Adelaide's Mega Taunt, or the taunt plus double dodge area. So as long as they're protected and they can do what they need to do, you're good. And finally, we've got denier, tank, attacker. So this one is a little bit less necessary because you do have 2 ways of protecting yourself from enemy attacks. So you can deny to make sure that they don't hit you, and you have a tank to make sure you don't get hit in the first place. So it's not as necessary really, but it is definitely still viable. There are definitely a ton of exceptions to this rule. These are just general team comps. Really, in wars, you can mess around with super interesting, unique team comps all the time and have a ton of fun with it. There's a little bit less room for creativity in multiplayer usually, but it's funny, Honen's really opened the door for that recently because he kind of just throws that whole thing out the window because you don't really need to run an attacker with him. And of course, there are a ton of other exceptions too, but the main one right now is Honen. He can literally just make any monster that deals damage an attacker. He, of course, can't make a monster like Primerion, an attacker who just literally doesn't deal any damage. But basically, anyone else, he can make them into an effective attacker. So he kind of throws that whole idea out the window, but he's a bit of a special case. There are definitely some weird, funky, interesting team composition to be made with Demonic Pact as well. Something that's very important to think about is what could you possibly be facing in the current meta. So it really does depend on your league. The lower league you are, the more inconsistent you'll find your battles are. Once you get to higher leagues, the meta will matter a lot more, but it is something to take into account. You do want to pay attention to what kind of monsters you're seeing in your league and how you can counter them if you're struggling to take them down. Something that's extremely important both in multiplayer and in wars is thinking about what your win condition is. So for example, my win condition with this team is going to be disabling any anticipation with Florian if they have any. That's why he's my 3-speed monster. The very first thing that my monsters need to do is disable that anticipation and disable the enemy Megaton if they have it, which almost guaranteed they will have both of those. Next up, I have to spam damage boost with Honen, get him awakened, spam them on my Diabolus, and then I attack with Diabolus, usually one-shots, but it is really something to think about when creating your team. You want to consider what your win condition is. What are the conditions in which you will be winning the battle? You figure out what your win condition is going to be. Maybe that's a specific monster, a specific talent, relic, trait, whatever it may be, and you build your team around that. You put your other 2 monsters in that team, rune them, relic them in a way that supports your win condition. So another example could be maybe Demonic Pact is your win condition. So you want to throw it down on Xmas. Xmas can hold Demonic Pact. Xmas has res block, so automatically you're good. Then you want to throw on Adelaide with a bunch of life runes. Stack Xmas up with a bunch of life runes. Throw on maybe like Gardenion with a bunch of life runes. Like the best stalling monster in the game. So your win condition would just be applying a 3-turn death countdown and throwing on a monster with resurrection block so the enemies can't revive. You stack your monsters up with as many life runes as you can, get them as tanky as possible so it takes the enemy as many turns as possible to kill them. It's a super cheesy strategy. Honestly, I hate it and it's pretty easily countered, but in lower leagues, it might not be as easily countered. I'm not really sure on what the climate is like league to league. I mostly know L1 and Olympus, but that is just like a really good example of a win condition and how to play into it. A quick example with my team that I noticed was really effective. I unfortunately don't have a Supreme Mask, which is the best mask for Honen. So what I did was I equipped a Cosmos Civilizations mask. So that gives Honen both stamina back and it gives him stamina regen, which actually lets him spam his extra turn skills, like I think probably 9+ more times before he runs out of stamina. So he gets 9 more random damage boosts and random haters. So that is playing into my win condition of spamming random haters and random damage boosts. So the last things that you want to think about when building your team are rune setups and relic setups. So for relics, you really want at least one relic with some sort of stamina regen. on your team. I try to do one on every monster unless it's like a war attack that I know I won't really need one on however many monsters. But really, stamina regen is key, and for the other relic, usually you want something that will apply tortures. Rune wise, this is not taking exceptions into account. Those exceptions being like Olympus, where team speed is really the key to everything, and Wars, where you can really mess around with your runes a lot to fit the perfect scenario. The ideal setups on most monsters would be as follows. Deniers will typically be either 3 speed or a mix of speed and team speed. You always want them to be the first monster to get a turn in. Attackers will usually be a mix of strength and speed or strength and team speed, so usually 1 strength and 2 speed or 1 strength and 2 team speed. Supporters should typically be either 3 team speed or a mix of speed and team speed. There are some older monsters like Uriel, Galvanus, Xmas, some older supporters that you may want to use, but their puny life stat makes you not want to use them. So for those monsters specifically, I would recommend throwing a life rune on them. So you want to do 1 life and 2 speed or 1 life and 2 team speed on them specifically. On tanks, you're going to run a mix of life and team speed. So it's typically going to be 1 life and 2 team speed. You can also run 3 team speed, especially on like Adelaide and Linneus, where they're really just there to either tank the first hit or tank any kind of like denials, tortures, that kind of thing. And for cursors, you're going to want speed, team speed, or a mix of both. That's going to be pretty much it for the video today, guys. I really appreciate anyone who has watched till the end of the video, and I really hope this has helped anyone who is still struggling with team composition, team building. If anyone has any questions or would like any help with anything specific, please let me know in the comments. I'm always happy to help. I love chatting about the game, and I will see you guys in the next one.